Hello everyone and welcome back to Astaroth49 Reads Brutal-Fairytales Stray Dogs Redemption. I'm hoping I can at least get 5 likes on this video. Please let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Please leave a like, share, comment, subscribe, and all the fun stuff. It really does help my channel grow. Now, seeing as I'm such a terrible narrator, I've found a good volunteer at naturalreaders.com. Just ask for Dave. He's volunteered his services to help me today. I do hope you enjoy the story, and without further ado, let us begin.
Outside the house, Astaroth walked to his grandfather's tool shed and unlocked it with his copy of the key. He pulled out an old faded red wagon with raised wooden walls and wide, white-walled tires. Inside of the wagon was a dog harness made from leather and heavy-duty cloth. Once the wagon was freed, Astaroth simply shut and locked the door to the tool shed. Or his grandfather would be cross with him if he left it unlocked. He carefully fastened the harness to his brother before they walked around the house. They followed the streets heading off to work as quickly as they could. Astaroth lit a cigarette as they walked down the streets illuminated by the street lamps. One by one the street lamps slowly started to dim to save on power for the city, as the sun would be coming out from the horizon any minute now. The city was softly lit by the moon, and the white golden halo around the planet. They gave all of what little white golden light they could to cover the cold dark streets of the city. Astaroth looked up into the starlit night skies above Zion. His cold dead eyes scanned the darkness between the stars, knowing that she was out there somewhere in the darkness. She might not be looking at the fifth pretty little black, blue, green, and white golden pearl from their sun right now. The very same pretty little pearl he called home. However, he knew this was true. The gaze of a god is left by none. Just because she may not be looking right now does not mean she does not know just what is going on. He knew she was out there somewhere playing deep within the cold, silent void of the nothingness. He wondered just what was she doing out there dwelling amongst the stars and the corpses of dead stars. Was she trying to find her way back home? Or was she simply exploring her new playground? Astaroth could still remember her song. He could still feel her voice down to his bones. He still wondered just who was she calling out to and just who answered her call from beyond the dark nothingness. Rook barked at his brother, snapping him back to his senses. Astaroth followed after his brother before they would be late. They paused for a moment as they came to the alleyway from yesterday. His body and eye quickly stung from phantom pains. However, he could not let this slow him down now. After all, these were nothing more than fading pains by now. As Rook let out a loud bark, snapping Astaroth back to his senses once more. Astaroth looked over to Rook and petted him before he flicked the cigarette aside and continued walking alongside his brother. Once Astaroth and Rook got back to the newspaper building, they saw a line of people, both young and old, waiting in a line. In between the newspaper building and the building next to it. As the others at the front of the line were leaving out the other side carrying the newspapers and quickly heading off to their routes, Astaroth and Rook got into the incoming line. All they could do now was to wait for it to be their turn now to get loaded up. Then they would have to quickly head out to their signed route for delivery. Once they got to the back of the building, Astaroth and Rook could see several tables lined with hot plates with coffee pots sitting on them. Next to the coffee pots were several cans of creams, sugars, paper cups, and wooden stirrers on the table. Sitting next to the tables were several coolers filled with ice and soda. In the middle of the area a man was supervising everything going on around him. He was a large, heavy-set, dark-skinned man wearing old, faded clothing. He must have had these clothes for an exceedingly long time. They were familiar to him. They were comfortable to him. They were a part of him, you could say. He was smoking a thick long cigar as he observed everything going on around him. In his left hand was a clipboard, a pen in his other. The lit cigar in his mouth slowly poured thick smoke out as he went about his job. He was slowly enjoying his cigar as he went about his morning duties. Through the thick wisps of smoke, his burn-scarred face showed through as the smoke slowly faded away into the air above him. The poor old man had only half a face left to him. The left half was normal, but the other half was burnt away. His right eye was burned shut, his right ear burnt over with a mechanical hearing aid surgically embedded behind what was left of his ear. His right cheek was burnt away. Only strains of thin muscle covered in flesh and steel wires holding his jaw together sat there now. In between the gap of his missing cheek, his golden teeth glittered in the weak light inside his mouth. Since his cheek was gone, everyone could see his upper and lower golden teeth of his jaw. Astaroth and Rook knew the burned man. He was the manager of this building and technically his boss. Above all, however, he was Astaroth's grandfather's drinking buddy. He and Astaroth's grandfather fought in the last war together so long ago now. His grandfather once told Astaroth and Rook that the man survived a mortar round that exploded just 10 feet from him. He got right back up and pulled himself past the skirmish line into the enemy trenches. Jack talked about him like he was immortal. Through all the bullets and chaos he kept on going no matter what. Even throughout all that he still managed to survive well, a part of him at least. Now he is the manager of this building and Astaroth's boss. His life must have been truly strange for all this to have happened. At least he was alive and healthy for the most part. He got to go home every night and see his wife. Or at least to Astaroth's knowledge. The moment he saw Astaroth and Rook were next in the line, he walked over to a cooler and grabbed a soda, then carried it over to him. "Good to see you two again. How is your granddad?" the man asked, handing over the soda to Astaroth. "He's still limping around the city, still the drill sergeant of the sharpshooters units. Mr. Johnny," Astaroth explained with his cold tone, taking the soda as the loaders quickly loaded up his wagon. Astaroth had to talk louder because Mr. Johnny was half deaf even with his hearing aid. "So can he still shoot the wings off a fly at 300 yards without a scope?" Mr. Johnny asked, looking at the loaders. 53 years old and still has eyes better than a hawk, sir," Astaroth answered with his cold tone. "You look good for a 12-year-old. I'd say you were 10. Mr. Johnny stated. Astaroth just hung his head. He knew that he lied about his age to get this job 2 years ago now. Mr. Johnny petted Astaroth's shoulder. "I won't tell, you're 10 now, so there's nothing we could really do about it. It's not like we can take the money we gave you back now, is it?" Mr. Johnny stated. Astaroth nodded his head quietly. "All right, you know where to go. Send your grandparents my regards. You keep him safe, fuzzball," Mr. Johnny said, pointing towards the exit line, as Rook barked, wagging his tail. "Hey, the hell you think you're doing?" Mr. Johnny shouted at a worker of the loading bay before storming off towards them. Once Astaroth's wagon was fully loaded up, they headed out down the street with the wagon in tow and Rook by his side. Both of them were on guard just in case the delinquents from yesterday showed back up. Or worse, the monster that stalked the city's streets would finally find them. They were ready for a fight should anything come their way. However, nothing happened. The city streets were still cold and dark and all but void of life. Nothing but the busy bustling of cars heading home or heading to the morning shifts. The electrical buzzing overhead let them know that life still flourished here. It was still now, it was calm and quiet. However, they knew this would not last forever, but for right now they could at least enjoy the peace and quiet. This is truly what they enjoyed the most. To finally be left alone to enjoy their own company and their own thoughts. To be free from the hassles of their life. Not to have to hear their parents arguing or his sister's spiteful words. They were truly alone now, and this is how they wanted it. Still, they knew all things must come to an end. All this would end for them the second they got home. That was why they tried to avoid going home as long as possible. Once his parents were finally gone, he would not have any problems about heading back to his grandparents' house. They just had to wait until his parents were finally gone. Then they would finally have some peace and quiet. At least a little, and that would be enough for them. Once they got to the start of their route, they looked around to make sure no one was following behind them. This was going to take some time after all. It would be a good time for either the delinquents or the monster to attack them. Astaroth locked the handle of the wagon onto Rook's harness. He walked behind his wagon and lit another cigarette. He quickly lit it, then put away his lighter. He pulled a foot-long Bowie knife out from the back of his belt. The blade was made out of a blackened, crunchy, scaly, rough forged metal with a false edge and sawing serration on the back of the knife. The handle was carved out of the end of a deer's antler with a horn used as a handle guard that hooked down over the user's hand. Under the horn was a worn, bent, flat brass band protecting the fingers. The antler itself was wrapped with old worn black leather that came close to the tip of the antler. 3 worn dull brass bands set on the handle pinning the leather in place. It was older even than Astaroth was himself. Probably even older than his grandparents. He truly just did not know it was nothing more than a trophy to him. Just another useful tool in his toolkit. He paused for a moment and looked at the knife. He has had it now for a good long time now, 2 years in fact. No matter how much he hated it, he could not bring himself to get rid of it. It felt wrong to him just to abandon it or just pawn it off for whatever money it was worth. Honestly, he did not even know if it belonged to the person he found it on. However, the memories that it held were all too important to him. He could not abandon it, otherwise it would feel like he was abandoning a part of himself. A part that, despite how much he hated, he knew he could not live without. So, he begrudgingly held onto it. He would probably continue to carry this blade until his last days on this godless world. He used the knife to sever the string holding the newspapers together. As he put his knife away, Rook started walking ahead of him. Astaroth threw a newspaper at each of the doors on the street. One after another, like clockwork, perfectly timed, perfectly aimed, and perfectly perfect. He could do this blindfolded without thought or effort. He had done it so many times now. He did not even need to look. All he had to do was to simply follow his brother in front of him. Grabbing another paper and throw it to one side then the other. One right after the other on down the street they went. Once they finished delivering the last newspaper, Astaroth noticed that there were 2 papers left. There was no point in throwing them at the next houses, after all they were someone else's problem now. The 2 of them turned around, heading back towards his grandparents' house. As they got back to the house, Astaroth filled a clay bowl with water from the water hose for Rook. As Rook drank the water, Astaroth disconnected the handle of the wagon from his brother's harness and removed the harness from him. He carefully put the wagon back in the tool shed so he could use it again tomorrow. He took one of the remaining newspapers before he dropped the harness back into the wagon, then locked up the tool shed. This was going to be their morning routine throughout the summer. In truth, Astaroth was on autopilot really. Just going about their daily ordeals just as they had done before. He was just going through the motions of pretending to be alive. This was all he really had. This was going to be their routine. This was familiar to them, it was all too real for them. This was their routine now. Their routine kept them safe. Their routine kept him sane. He knew that he could not break his routine, or everything would come crashing down around him. This was all that was keeping what was left of his sanity intact anymore. Repetition, routine, the familiar, the same old never changing. For if it ever did, he did not know what he would do. He would collapse into his own madness and bloodlust all over again. He could not let that happen, nor would he let that happen. There was no need for it, no use for it. It was uncalled for and unwanted. He did not need it, but he knew that he wanted it all too badly and he could not truly live without it. The violent beast he had to keep locked away deep inside him. He had to keep it in check, or he would become what he hated most above all else. A maniac, a psycho killer who could not tell delusion from reality anymore. A true beast thirsting for blood with no real way to distinguish between friend or foe, the innocent or guilty. Nor truly being able to care as to whose blood he spilled. He knew that it would not be too much longer now. For he was simply a dead thing pretending to be alive. A dead thing made in the image of the dead, and the dead have no right amongst the living. They have no need for pain, for they have no need to suffer. For suffering was the purification of the body and the purification of one's soul. For at the point when you can no longer feel pain, then you can no longer suffer, and if you can no longer suffer, then you can simply never be redeemed. That notion truly terrified him to no end. He would one day become no different than a mindless beast wandering about, seeking whom he may devour without cause or prejudice, without justification or retaliation. Little more than a mindless killing machine, a big dumb dog who cannot stop eating even though its belly is long since filled to the brim and has long since hit the point of bursting. Still, it will continue on devouring all in its sight, living, the dead, the innocent, and the guilty. A mindless, soulless eating machine. That was not him right now, and he was going to hold on to what little sanity he had left for as long as he possibly could. For on that day, he did not truly know if he would be able to stop himself or if he would even care to try. They set back out into the city. They stopped off at a general store. Astaroth bought a soda, a bag of beef jerky, a fresh pack of cigarettes, and 3 pounds of ground beef with diced vegetables mixed in it. Then they headed off towards the city park. Once they were there, Astaroth sat down on a bench. He laid out the ground beef for Rook. Before he sat on the bench and started reading through the newspaper, eating his beef jerky and drinking his soda. It was the same old normal news reports in the newspaper. Several sales going on throughout the city. War bonds were going up, the stock market seems good, at least it seems good for now at least. A public reminder that winter would be coming back in no time. So, there were public reminders to all to reserve a place in Arkham Sanctuary or Haven before the long winter sets in once again. It would only be a few short months before winter came back. For winters in Zion were unforgiving to all who are not prepared. 4 months of below freezing cold weather, the plague of beasts that comes with it, and the risen dead who had not yet moved onto the other side of the fence. There was nothing different than the normal news. Not until he came to a report about a serial killer still on the loose in the city. Astaroth choked up his soda as he read through the report. Another mother and daughter were found brutally beaten to death with a ball bat. The authorities still have no leads on the suspect at large and are encouraging all families not to go out alone or unarmed. The City Watch had been unable to stop this deranged psychopath for 2 years now. Chief Bullock is still refusing the help of the regulators' aid in this dreadful time. He claims that the City Watch is more than qualified to stop this rabid, ruthless killer amongst us. God help us, he is right. Astaroth's hands grew cold as he shook the paper, a cold sweat gripped a hold of him tightly. 2 years and nothing has changed. His hands trembled as he tried to take a drink of his soda. Astaroth took a deep breath to calm himself. As the cold glass touched his lips, Rook began to growl violently. Astaroth, is that you? I have waited 3 long seasons to see you again. A girl's voice called out. Astaroth spewed his soda out, almost choking on it, and started coughing. He knew that voice, and he knew that voice all too well. He could not believe it, but it did not stop it from being true. As he choked on the fizz soda, Astaroth quickly sprung to his feet and turned towards the voice. There was a young girl smiling at him. It was her. This was the monster that Astaroth feared. This was the monster that lived inside the city. She walked towards him in a new red sundress and shiny new black shoes. Astaroth slowly backed away from the girl. This was bad. The monster had found him and there was nowhere to go. He knew that he had to get away from here, and fast. He took a deep breath and calmed his nerves as he started to think. Maybe this was a simple blessing in disguise. He just had to see it. After all, he was in the city park right now and there were not that many people here at this time. Maybe this was a simple miracle presenting itself to him. He could finally be rid of this monster once and for all. If he could just trick her and lead her to the heart of the park, then he could properly dispose of her and feed her remains to his dogs. Then she would be dead and gone and could not haunt him anymore. He just had to think of a way to get her to follow him that deep into the park. He knew this monster, he knew it all too well. He knew all about her and her sick appetites. He quickly started to plan a way to take advantage of her sick appetites and play it to his advantage. He could not bring himself to pull the trigger yesterday. That, however, was yesterday, and this was a completely different set of circumstances for him right now. Once she was dead and gone, he could finally breathe a sigh of relief. He would finally be free of her and her sick demands. Her constant hammering, her overzealous clinginess to him. They would finally be free of her, and that would be a good thing. It should be sickening for him how quickly his mind resorts to murder to deal with his problems. This, however, simply had to be done and over with. Unlike before, this was the right thing to do, and he knew it. He could live with himself afterwards, he could deal with it. He would have to, otherwise everything would never change. She had a bad habit of breaking his routine and forcing him to play her sick games. In truth, he did not mind her company in the least. He did not dislike her in the least. It was her over-clinginess that he despised more than anything. She was nothing but trouble for him. So, it would be best to deal with this problem now than let her continue to run rampant. He knew that he would only be doing what he should have done last year. If the situation had presented itself properly to him back then, he probably would have dealt with it then and there. That, however, was then. This is now. Now he could deal with the problem and finally be done with it for good. He could finally wash his hands of her and be done with this game. He tried not to let it show as he looked towards her. He looked at her with his cold, dead eyes as a plan quickly started to form inside his twisted mind. Now he just needed her to play his little game and he could finally be done with her once and for all. "Oh hey, Ash, there you are. I was hoping I'd find you here," Alastair's voice called out. Astaroth quickly turned around and saw Alastair walking towards them. This was bad. Alastair had just shattered Astaroth's entire plan just by showing up now. This just kept getting worse for him now. Just what in the world was he doing here now? Of all the most impractical timing. He was going to ruin everything. Still, Astaroth had to think on his feet and think fast. He had to get Alastair out of here now or he was going to die at the hands of this monster. "Who the hell is he?" the girl snapped, pointing at Alastair. Astaroth looked back at the girl quickly, thinking of what to say. "Shit, this is Astaroth said, grasping at anything to save this until Rook barked at him. Right, Al, and I have things to do today, so goodbye. Astaroth said as he carefully walked away from the girl. Astaroth grabbed Alastair and pulled him along. Can I come along? The girl asked, walking towards them. Before Alastair could say a word, Astaroth punched his back, shutting him up. No, no, no. Dirty work, you know, and you would not want to destroy your new dress. Astaroth quickly answered as he started to pull Alastair away. You do look cute, Astaroth stated to quickly calm the monster. Okay, so I'll see you later then. The girl stated, confused. I wouldn't bet the farm on that. We'll be at this all day, Astaroth explained as he walked away, practically dragging Alastair with him. This idiot just had to show up now at this time. Everything that Astaroth had just planned out was now shattered in an instant. Now he wondered if he would ever get another chance like this one ever again. Still, that was a problem for future Astaroth to deal with. For right now he had to keep this idiot alive. At the very least he would do one good thing today by saving this moronic idiot's life. He still did not even like him. He did not understand him. However, he could not just let him die senselessly to that monster. For what was the blight of the sheepdog? Which sheep are worth me baring my fangs to protect, and which ones are not worth me protecting? Alastair seems to be one that he had to protect, to remind himself that he was not a beast, nor was he a monster. For right now he just had to get him out of here alive. Nothing else really mattered at this moment. He would deal with the monster at a later time. For right now he had to leave. That is what bothered him deeply. It was as if everything had aligned perfectly for him. He could have finally been done with her and been done with all this. Then Alastair just had to show up here and now. He just had to go and ruin everything for Astaroth. Alastair waved goodbye as Astaroth pulled him along. The girl forced a smile and waved goodbye to them. Once Alastair turned forwards, her eyes quickly turned cold. She did not like this, and she did not like him interfering. Still, for now there was nothing she could do about it. She would have to bide her time until the moment was right. Then she could deal with Alastair later. She watched them leave her standing in the park. She walked over to the bench Astaroth was sitting on and took the soda he left behind. She looked at it before she picked it up. For right now all she could do was wait until the moment was right. Then Astaroth would be hers and hers alone. She finished off the rest of the drink before she threw it into the trash. She turned around and headed out of the park. For now, she just had to be patient a little longer. Astaroth quickly pulled Alastair down the street. He kept looking behind to make sure that the monster was not following them. It took all of his focus not to hit Alastair. After all, he just completely ruined Astaroth's entire plan in one single moment. He was so close to finally being rid of that monster. Then out of nowhere this idiot just shows up and ruins everything at the last second. He had half a mind to just put a bullet in Alastair's lap to finally get him to leave them alone. However, he knew he would not be able to justify that to the authorities. At least for now he may be safe from that monster. However, he knew that Alastair would not be safe from her for very long. Because she was like a shark, her eyes were locked forward. Whatever she did not know or recognize, she would bite just to see what it was. That was the most dangerous part about her. She truly just did not care for the suffering of others like Astaroth was himself. Astaroth wished that he was above such thoughts himself, however he knew that would be a lie. He too just could not bring himself to care for the suffering of others. Maybe that is why he was attracted to her. After all, both of them were just heartless monsters trying to pretend to be human. However, he knew when to bare his fangs and when not to. So, "Who was that, your secret girlfriend?" Alastair asked childishly. Astaroth became enraged as he grabbed Alastair by the straps of his overalls and slammed him onto the side of a building. "Okay, you simple-minded dumb fuck, you listen the fuck up and you listen well. If you ever see her again, you turn ass and you run like hell. Okay, don't talk to her, don't go near her. The moment you see her again, you de-ass yourself from the area and you run like the devil himself is behind you. You got that?" Astaroth explained with absolute authority over Alastair. Alastair just nodded his head at Astaroth, confused by what he was told. "Okay, I get she's your girl, now calm down." "She's your girlfriend, I got it," Alastair said, looking at the fury in Astaroth's eyes. Astaroth released Alastair and took a few steps from him as he took a deep breath. Astaroth lit another cigarette, trying to steady his nerves. He let out a puff of smoke before he looked back to Alastair and saw the confusion on his face. He took another puff off his cigarette, then blew the smoke into Alastair's face. "She's not my damn girlfriend, are we clear?" Astaroth stated calmly as Alastair fanned the smoke away with his hand. "Yeah, we're clear," he said, still lost in this confusion. "Now back to business. I specifically informed you to stay away from me." "So, what the hell do you want?" Astaroth said in disgust with him as he smoked his cigarette. "Okay, look, I need your assistance with a job," Alastair explained. "No. Now go fuck yourself," Astaroth said, walking away with Rook next to him. "It's $100 job," Alastair shouted, stopping Astaroth in his tracks. Astaroth and Rook looked at each other before looking back at Alastair. "You got 1 minute to explain, so talk fast," Astaroth stated, storming back towards Alastair. "Pest control, straight off the odd jobs listing board. Just gotta deal with some dread rats, no sweat," Alastair explained. Astaroth quickly erupted into laughter. "You are stupid. Dread rats, seriously? You know those damn things are the size of a good hunting dog and in all likelihood probably are still carrying the goddamn plague," Astaroth said, shaking his head. This was insane to both Astaroth and Rook. "I've had my inoculations, I know you have, so there's no risk contracting the virus. Now do we have an accord or not?" Alastair explained, extending his hand. "Fuck it, fine, 60-40 split." "I'm the 60, deal with it," Astaroth reluctantly said, agreeing with this insanity he found himself in. As he shook Alastair's hand, he tried to wrap his mind around what they were about to do. "Done deal. Now come on, follow me, soldier," Alastair ordered, marching off down the street. "We're going to fucking die," Astaroth stated quickly as Alastair walked down the street.
Okay, everyone, that was David. Can I please get an F down in the chat for the Borg soul? Thank him so much for all of his hard work. I've been told that my natural voice is the equivalent of resting bitch face. There's really nothing I can do about that, and I'm terribly sorry. Please, if you stuck around this point, let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. I'll have more coming out as soon as I possibly can. Please leave a like, share, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff for me, as it really does help my channel grow. I really do appreciate it. Thank you all for your time, and have a beautiful day. Goodbye.